Hi, Professor Balkin. I understood your structural argument to be saying that basically there's a textual constitutional commitment of this issue to Congress, and that makes sense to me in the cases where it's about like how Congress operates itself. But it seems like there's some high-level separation of powers things going on here where you're saying Congress has the power to decide a question that's rooted in Article 2, and I was wondering if there are other constitutional provisions about Article 2 or 3 that you think are committed to Congress? Like, do we just see this problem somewhere else?
Yeah, I mean, to be more precise, what happens is you've transferred over the power of naturalization to Congress that used to be in the British Parliament, both kinds of naturalization. And so Congress has some leeway, but it's still possible that Congress could, in fact, overstep its power to make people citizens by birth. So let's take the paradigm case. Paradigm case is Vladimir Putin very much wants to be president of the United States. And so what happens is he bribes enough people in Congress and they make him a natural-born citizen. Now, my view is that that probably is beyond their power, right? He doesn't have any connection to the country, and therefore I would argue that there's a separation of powers issue. The court has the power to say that's an unconstitutional extension. But what Article 1, Section 8 does is give Congress a certain leeway to define who's a natural-born citizen. It can't go less than the 14th Amendment, which has solved the old question of where does it stop. 14th Amendment is a baseline. And it can't go further than a certain point. Okay? Now, as to the question of whether Congress has legislative power with respect to presidential qualifications and succession, the answer is yes. Even in the 1787 Constitution, Congress could decide what happens when the president dies, who becomes the next president, and if the vice president dies, who becomes the next president. And that is altered again in the 25th Amendment. And the 25th Amendment also reiterates that Congress has the power to set up what are quasi-constitutional rules of succession. So the idea that Congress would have this role of basically deciding who can become president is not a crazy one if you think about how the structure is organized.
Right, except there I would invoke Article 1, Section 8, Clause 18. I would say that that's necessary and proper to the effectuation of the presidency. Now, take a thought experiment. Suppose, given how many people in Congress apparently are not exactly fond of Ted Cruz, Congress were to pass by an overwhelming majority a law saying Ted Cruz is not a natural-born citizen. Now, maybe it's a bill of attainder in violation of Article, but is it a punishment not to be president? The court said even
that's a really interesting question.
I think it's a punishment. It's a punishment to be president. When Barack was, when he won, I thought he should have asked for a recount because but seriously, if it's not a punishment to expel someone from the country, as it isn't under current law, I think to exclude someone from the presidency may not be a bill of attainder. But even setting aside the bill of attainder, I think that suggests that there are structural limits, like the limit on trial by legislature, on Congress's powers here. And I think that if Congress does not have a free-floating power to define natural-born citizen, any more than it does to say, what does the number 35 mean? Is it in base 10 or base 12? It doesn't have that power. Then I don't know how it gets precisely the power that my friend Jack says it has.